The blood-red sunset painted the horizon as Hope Greene staggered down the dusty road leading out of Silver Creek, Montana, one hand clutching her swollen belly, the other gripping a small bundle of possessions wrapped in a threadbare shawl. The year was 1876, and at 22 years old, Hope found herself homeless, 8 months pregnant, and bearing the fresh bruises of her husband's final rage. "Don't you dare come back, you worthless whore." Vernon's words still rang in her ears as she struggled to put one foot in front of the other, the early autumn wind cutting through her thin dress. The same dress she'd been wearing when he dragged her to the door and thrown her onto the porch, accusing her of carrying another man's child, though she knew with absolute certainty it was his. Hope had married Vernon when she was barely 18, desperate to escape her father's tyranny. She'd traded one prison for another, enduring 4 years of Vernon's escalating cruelty, his drunken rages, his accusations, and his fists. The baby had only made things worse. Vernon didn't want children, they cost money and required attention, and he'd grown more violent as her belly swelled until tonight, when his rage had finally exploded beyond all restraint. Darkness was falling rapidly, and Hope had no destination in mind. The nearest town was 15 miles away, an impossible journey in her condition. Her friends, the few Vernon had allowed her to keep, lived too close to town, and he would surely hunt her down if she sought refuge with them. Terror and exhaustion battled within her as she stumbled along, her breath forming small clouds in the chilling air. The first contraction hit her just as the silhouette of a small ranch house appeared in the distance. Hope gasped, doubling over as pain tore through her abdomen. Too early. The baby wasn't due for another month. She straightened, squinting at the warm light spilling from the ranch house windows. Smoke curled from the chimney, promising warmth she desperately needed. Pride warred with necessity as another contraction gripped her. Hope had never begged for anything in her life, not even when Vernon's beatings were at their worst. But the baby, her innocent child, deserved a chance. With renewed determination, she forced her trembling legs to carry her toward the light. The ranch was modest but well kept. A small barn stood off to the side, and a corral held 3 horses that watched her approach with curious eyes. Hope made it as far as the front porch before another contraction brought her to her knees, a cry of pain escaping her lips. The door swung open, and a tall figure backlit by the warm interior stepped onto the porch. "Who's there?" called a deep voice, neither threatening nor particularly welcoming. "Please," Hope managed, her voice barely above a whisper. "I need help." The figure moved closer, and Hope caught her first glimpse of the rancher, a man in his late 20s with sun-weathered skin and eyes the color of a summer storm. He wore simple clothes, well-worn but clean, and his dark hair was slightly too long, curling at the nape of his neck. "Madam." His eyes widened as he took in her condition, the bruises, the pregnancy, the desperation. "Good Lord, what happened to you?" "My husband," Hope began, but another contraction cut her words short, and she doubled over, clutching her belly. Without hesitation, the man moved forward, scooping her into his arms with surprising gentleness for someone so obviously strong. "The baby's coming," she gasped against his chest. "I've got you," he said, carrying her inside. "My name's Owen Zachariah." The interior of the ranch house was simple but comfortable, a far cry from the cold shack she'd shared with Vernon. Owen laid her carefully on a bed in what appeared to be the only bedroom, then moved with surprising efficiency, gathering clean linens and heating water on the stove. "I'm Hope," she managed between contractions. "Hope Greene." "Your husband did this to you?" Owen asked, his voice tight as he dampened a cloth and gently wiped the dirt from her face, careful to avoid the bruises. Hope nodded, unable to speak as another wave of pain crashed over her. When it subsided, she whispered, "He threw me out, said the baby wasn't his." A muscle tightened in Owen's jaw. "And is it?" "Yes," Hope gasped, "but it wouldn't matter if it weren't. It's innocent." Something shifted in Owen's expression. "I'll ride for the doctor," he said, already moving toward the door. "No time," Hope cried, feeling the unmistakable pressure. "The baby's coming now." Owen paused, conflict clear on his face. "Mrs. Greene, I don't know the first thing about delivering babies." "Neither do I," Hope admitted, attempting a weak smile despite her fear. But this little one isn't waiting for experience. For the next 4 hours, Owen Zachariah proved himself to be more capable than either of them had expected. He brought water, held her hand through contractions, and followed her instinctive instructions. When Hope thought she couldn't bear another moment, Owen's steady voice anchored her. His strength seemed to flow into her through their joined hands. "You can do this," he told her, his eyes never leaving hers. "You're the strongest woman I've ever met." With one final, tremendous effort, Hope brought her daughter into the world. The baby's indignant cry filled the small bedroom, and Hope collapsed against the pillows, tears streaming down her face. "She's beautiful," Owen whispered, carefully wrapping the infant in a clean shirt and placing her in Hope's arms. "Perfect." Hope gazed down at her daughter's tiny face, overwhelmed by love so intense it seemed to physically squeeze her heart. "Hello, little one," she murmured. "You're safe now." But even as she spoke the words, doubt crept in. They weren't safe. Vernon might come looking for her. And even if he didn't, she had nowhere to go, no money, no prospects, and a newborn to care for. As if sensing her thoughts, Owen spoke. "You can stay here," he said quietly, "both of you, until you're well enough to travel at least." Hope looked up at him, searching his face for any sign of deception or ulterior motive. She found none, only kindness and a hint of something that might have been loneliness. "Why would you help a stranger?" she asked. Owen was quiet for a long moment. "Because 7 years ago, I rode away from a woman who needed my help. Because I was young and afraid. I've regretted it every day since." He met her gaze directly. "I won't make that mistake again." Hope wanted to ask more, but exhaustion was claiming her, the events of the day finally taking their toll. As her eyes drifted closed, she felt Owen gently take the baby from her arms. "Rest," he said. "I'll take care of her." When Hope awoke, sunlight was streaming through the window, and for a disorienting moment she couldn't remember where she was. Then it all came rushing back: Vernon's rage, her desperate flight, the baby's birth, the kind rancher who had taken them in. Panic seized her as she realized her daughter wasn't beside her. Hope struggled to sit up, ignoring the pain that shot through her body. "Easy now," came Owen's voice from the doorway. He entered, cradling her daughter with surprising competence. "She's just fine. Been fed some cow's milk through a cloth, and she took to it well enough. Didn't want to wake you, you needed the sleep." Relief washed over Hope as Owen placed the baby in her arms. Her daughter was indeed fine, clean, wrapped in what looked like a new blanket and sleeping peacefully. "Thank you," Hope whispered, gazing down at her child, "for everything." Owen nodded, looking slightly uncomfortable with her gratitude. "I've sent word to Doc Miller in town. He should be out here by midday to check on you both." Hope's contentment evaporated. "You told someone I'm here." "My husband, I didn't give any names," Owen assured her quickly. "Just said I had a woman and newborn who needed medical attention. Doc's discreet, known him for years." Hope relaxed slightly, but worry still gnawed at her. "I can't stay here long. Vernon will look for me eventually." "Vernon," Owen repeated, his expression darkening. "That's your husband?" Hope nodded, unconsciously touching a fading bruise on her cheek. "Vernon Blackwell. He owns the Mercantile in Silver Creek." Recognition flashed in Owen's eyes. Tall fellow. Red hair, fancy clothes, always seems to have a bottle close at hand. "That's him," Hope confirmed, a shiver running through her despite the warm room. Owen was quiet for a moment, seeming to weigh his words. "Mrs. Greene, I meant what I said last night. You and your daughter can stay here as long as you need. If your husband comes looking, well, my land's private property, and I've got a shotgun that enforces that privacy quite effectively." The matter-of-fact way he said it, not as a threat or boast, but as a simple statement of truth, made Hope study him more closely. Owen Zachariah wasn't what she'd expected in a rancher. His speech was educated, his manners refined despite his rough exterior. There was a gentleness to him that seemed at odds with the strength in his hands and the determination in his jaw. "Why are you alone out here?" Hope asked before she could stop herself. "You seem like a good man. Most good men have families." A shadow passed over Owen's face. "Had a wife once. Emily, she and our son died in childbirth 6 years ago." He said it simply, but Hope could see the grief still etched in the lines around his eyes. "After I couldn't stand the pity in everyone's eyes, bought this place and started over." I'm sorry, Hope said softly. Owen shook his head. Don't be, it was a long time ago. He straightened, clearly uncomfortable with the turn in conversation. You should name her, he said, nodding toward the baby. Hope looked down at her sleeping daughter, this miracle who had survived against all odds. Grace, she decided. Her name is Grace. True to Owen's word, Doc Miller arrived shortly after noon. He was an elderly man with kind eyes and gentle hands who examined both Hope and Grace with thorough care. Both mother and child are remarkably well, considering the circumstances, he pronounced when finished. He fixed Hope with a knowing look. Those bruises weren't from falling, I take it. Hope dropped her gaze, shame flooding her, though she knew she had nothing to be ashamed of. No, sir. The doctor patted her hand. You're not the first woman I've seen in such a state, and sadly, you won't be the last. But you've got courage coming here in your condition. He glanced at Owen. And you've found a good man to help you. She can stay as long as she needs, Owen said from where he stood near the door. I've got the space and I could use the company. Dr. Miller nodded, gathering his things. Bed rest for at least a week, he instructed Hope. The baby seems healthy, but she came early, so keep her warm and fed. He handed Owen a small package. Herbs for tea will help with milk production and healing. After the doctor left, Owen busied himself preparing a meal while Hope nursed Grace. The domesticity of the scene struck her as surreal 24 hours ago. She'd been certain she and her baby would die on that dusty road. I can cook, Hope offered, watching Owen struggle with the stove. Once I'm up and about, and clean and tend the garden if you have one, I want to earn my keep. Owen looked over his shoulder at her. Mrs. Greene, Hope, she interrupted. Please, just Hope. Hope, he amended with a slight nod. You don't need to earn anything, helping you isn't a transaction. Nevertheless, Hope insisted, I won't be a burden, I've been that before and I won't do it again. Owen seemed about to argue, then apparently thought better of it. We'll talk about it when you're stronger. The days passed in a peaceful rhythm unlike anything Hope had experienced in her married life. Owen proved to be a considerate host, giving her privacy when she needed it, but offering companionship as well. He was surprisingly good with Grace, handling the newborn with confidence that belied his claim of inexperience. You're a natural with her, Hope observed one evening as Owen walked the floor with a fussy Grace, humming a tune Hope didn't recognize. A sad smile touched his lips. I used to imagine doing this with my son, he admitted quietly. What I would teach him, the man he would become. Hope's heart ached for him. I'm sorry we've invaded your home, bringing back painful memories. Owen shook his head. Not all memories are painful, and you're being here. He hesitated. It's good not to be alone all the time. As Hope regained her strength, she insisted on taking over household duties despite Owen's protests. She found satisfaction in creating order and comfort, turning the functional bachelor's quarters into something approaching a home. She discovered that Owen was an avid reader. Shelves of books lined one wall of the main room, ranging from practical guides on ranching to poetry and philosophy. My father was a schoolteacher, Owen explained when he caught her examining his collection. Believed education was the greatest gift he could give his children. You had siblings, a sister, Elizabeth. She lives in San Francisco now, married to a banker. Pride colored his voice. Smartest person I've ever known. Writes me letters every month, telling me I should sell this place and move to civilization. Hope smiled, imagining the sophisticated city woman trying to lure her brother away from his solitary life. Why don't you? Owen was quiet for a moment, his gaze drifting to the window where the rolling Montana landscape stretched to the horizon. This land gets in your blood, he said finally. Becomes part of you. I couldn't leave it now. As weeks passed, Hope grew increasingly aware of Vernon's absence. Each day without his appearance was both a relief and a source of tension, as she couldn't help wondering when he would come looking for her. Maybe he's glad to be rid of me, she said to Owen one evening as they sat by the fire, Grace sleeping peacefully in a cradle Owen had crafted from an old apple barrel. Maybe he's already found someone else to torment. Owen's expression darkened. Men like that don't let go easily. They see wives as property. You speak as if you've known such men. My sister's first husband, Owen said, his voice tight. Beat her for 2 years before she finally fled to San Francisco. I wanted to kill him, but Elizabeth made me promise not to. Said violence would only beget more violence. She sounds wise, Hope murmured. She is. Owen stared into the fire. But sometimes I wonder if there isn't a place for righteous violence in this world. His words hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Hope found herself studying Owen's profile, the strong line of his jaw, the seriousness in his eyes. In the month since he'd taken her in, she'd come to respect him deeply, his quiet strength, his unwavering principles, his gentleness with grace. And if she was being honest with herself, something more than respect was growing in her heart, something she dared not name. The first snow fell in early November, transforming the landscape into a pristine wonderland that took Hope's breath away. Grace was thriving, growing stronger each day, her tiny features becoming more defined. She had Hope's dark hair, and Hope thought something of Owen in the shape of her eyes, though she knew that was impossible. First snowfall means winter's set in for good, Owen remarked, coming in from tending the livestock. Travel will be difficult until spring. Hope felt a curious mix of relief and disappointment at his words. Relief because it meant Vernon was unlikely to appear until the thaw, disappointment because it also meant she had an excuse to stay longer. I should be making plans, she said, more to herself than to Owen, for where Grace and I will go when spring comes. Owen brushed snow from his coat, his expression carefully neutral. You don't have to go anywhere. Hope looked up sharply. What do you mean? Owen seemed to choose his words with care. This place is too big for one person, always has been. There's room for you both, permanently if you want it. Hope's heart stuttered. Owen, I can't accept charity indefinitely. It's not charity I'm offering. He met her gaze, and there was something in his eyes that made her breath catch. I'm offering partnership. I need help with this ranch, and you need a safe place for you and Grace. It's practical for both of us. Hope studied him, trying to discern what lay beneath his words. Was there more he wanted to say, more he was feeling but couldn't express? Or was she projecting her own growing feelings onto him? People would talk, she said finally. A man and woman living together, unmarried. People always talk, Owen replied with a shrug. Doesn't make what they say true. Before Hope could respond, a sharp knock at the door startled them both. Owen's hand went instinctively to the rifle mounted above the fireplace. Stay here, he murmured, moving cautiously to the door. Hope gathered Grace protectively in her arms, her heart pounding. Had Vernon found them after all? Relief washed over her when she heard Sheriff Tom Parker's gruff voice. The sheriff was a frequent visitor, stopping by to check on them whenever his duties brought him to this part of the county. Evening, Owen, the sheriff said, stomping snow from his boots as he entered. Hope, he nodded respectfully in her direction. Little one doing well. Growing stronger every day, Hope replied, forcing a smile despite her lingering anxiety. Good, good. The sheriff accepted the coffee Owen offered, warming his hands around the mug. Came out to let you know there's been some trouble in town. Owen's posture tensed. What kind of trouble? Vernon Blackwell's been asking questions about his runaway wife, the sheriff said, his gaze flicking to Hope. Seems mighty interested in finding her. Cold fear gripped Hope. He knows I'm here? No, the sheriff assured her. Far as I know, he's been asking in every town within 50 miles. But he's getting desperate, and desperate men do desperate things. Owen's expression hardened. Let him come, he'll find a shotgun waiting. That's what I'm worried about, Sheriff Parker sighed. Look, I've no love for Blackwell, man's a mean drunk and worse sober. But I can't have bloodshed in my county. What would you have me do? Owen demanded. Turn Hope and the baby out? Course not, the sheriff said, looking offended at the suggestion. Just saying you might want to consider your options. He hesitated, then added, there's legal ways to handle this. Divorce isn't unheard of in cases of cruelty. Hope gave a bitter laugh. Vernon would never agree to a divorce. His pride wouldn't allow it. Might not have a choice if the judge hears evidence of his treatment of you, the sheriff pointed out. Those bruises healed, but Doc Miller documented them, and there's my own observations of Blackwell's violent tendencies. Hope felt a flutter of hope. Could it really be that simple? Nothing simple about it, Sheriff Parker warned. Be a nasty business, public accusations flying, but in the end you'd be free of him, legal and proper. After the sheriff left, silence hung heavily between Hope and Owen. Grace stirred in her sleep, making small noises that normally brought a smile to Hope's face, but now she could only think of the danger Vernon represented. "I should leave," Hope said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "Take Grace somewhere far away where he'll never find us." "And go where?" Owen demanded, more sharply than she'd ever heard him speak. "Do what? Live in fear, always looking over your shoulder." He crossed the room in 2 strides, kneeling before her chair and taking her hands in his. "Hope, listen to me. You deserve better than that." "Grace deserves better." Tears blurred Hope's vision. "I can't ask you to risk yourself for us." "You didn't ask, I'm offering." Owen's grip on her hands tightened. "Stay, fight for your freedom. I'll be beside you every step." Something in his voice made Hope look up, really look at him. What she saw in his eyes stole her breath. Determination, certainly, but also something deeper, warmer, something that made her heart race with possibilities she hadn't dared contemplate. "Why?" she asked, needing to hear him say it. Owen seemed to struggle with himself for a moment. "Because I care what happens to you," he said finally. "To both of you." It wasn't quite the declaration Hope's heart secretly longed for, but it was enough for now. She nodded slowly. "All right, we'll stay and fight." The days that followed were tense with anticipation. Sheriff Parker began the legal proceedings for a divorce on grounds of cruelty, and according to his reports, Vernon was furious, denying all accusations and claiming Hope had been unfaithful. "Let him say what he will," Owen told her when the news reached them. "Truth has a way of making itself known." Hope wasn't so certain. Vernon was well respected in Silver Creek, a businessman who contributed to the church and presented a polished face to the public. Who would believe her word against his? Her fears were realized when, a week before the scheduled court date, Vernon Blackwell appeared at Owen's ranch. The snow had temporarily receded, making the roads passable, and Vernon had seized the opportunity. Owen was in the barn when Vernon's wagon pulled up. Hope was alone in the house with Grace, and when she saw her husband through the window, terror froze her in place. He looked exactly as she remembered, tall and imposing in his fine clothes, his red hair and beard neatly trimmed, his face set in an expression of righteous indignation that she knew could transform to rage in an instant. "Hope," Vernon's voice boomed across the yard. "I know you're in there. Come out and face me, you deceitful witch." Hope gathered Grace to her chest, the baby whimpering at the loud noise. She had no weapon, no means of defense if Vernon broke down the door, but she wouldn't cower. She'd found her strength in these past months, and she wouldn't surrender it now. Taking a deep breath, Hope stepped onto the porch, keeping Grace sheltered against her. "You shouldn't have come, Vernon." Vernon's eyes narrowed at the sight of the baby. "So it's true, you bore the bastard." "She's your daughter," Hope said, lifting her chin. "Though she'll never know you as her father, thank God." Vernon's face contorted with rage. "You think I'll allow this? My wife living with another man, passing off a bastard as mine, dragging my name through the mud with false accusations." "There's nothing false about what you did to me," Hope replied, her voice steadier than she felt. "The bruises have healed, but the memories haven't." Vernon took a step toward the porch, and Hope instinctively backed away. "You're coming home with me," he snarled. "Now, before I lose my patience." "She's not going anywhere with you." Hope's heart leaped at the sound of Owen's voice. He emerged from the barn, rifle in hand, his expression coldly furious. Vernon sneered. "This is the man you've been whoring yourself to, this nobody rancher." "That nobody rancher has shown me more kindness in 3 months than you did in 4 years of marriage," Hope retorted. Vernon's face darkened. "You think I'll let this stand? Let you humiliate me this way?" He turned to Owen. "Whatever she's told you, it's lies. She's been unstable since we married, prone to hysterics and delusions." "Strange," Owen replied, his voice dangerously calm. "She seems perfectly stable to me, clear-headed, rational, and the most devoted mother I've ever seen." Vernon's hand moved to his coat, and Hope's blood ran cold, certain he was reaching for a weapon. But Owen was faster, raising his rifle in one fluid motion. "I wouldn't," Owen warned, his finger steady on the trigger. "Now, Mr. Blackwell, I suggest you get back in your wagon and leave." "Hope has made her choice, and it isn't you." Vernon's face flushed with anger. You can't hide behind him forever, Hope. One way or another, I'll make you pay for this betrayal. The only one who will be paying is you, came another voice, and Hope nearly collapsed with relief as Sheriff Parker rode into the yard, accompanied by 2 deputies. Vernon Blackwell, you're in violation of a court order to stay away from your wife pending the divorce hearing. Vernon's expression shifted from rage to calculation in an instant. I was merely trying to reason with my wife, Sheriff, convince her to come home where she belongs. That's not how it looked to me, the sheriff said dryly. Seemed more like threatening to me. And we take threats serious in this county. This is absurd, Vernon blustered. She's my wife. The law gives me rights. The law also gives her protection from harm, Sheriff Parker countered. Now you can leave peacefully or you can spend the night in my jail, your choice. For a moment, Hope thought Vernon would refuse. His hands clenched into fists and the vein in his temple throbbed visibly. But then, with a final venomous glare at Hope and Owen, he climbed back into his wagon. This isn't over, he spat as he snapped the reins. Only when Vernon's wagon had disappeared down the road did Hope realize she was shaking. Owen was at her side in an instant, his arm around her shoulders, steadying her. You're safe, he murmured. He's gone. Sheriff Parker approached, removing his hat. I apologize for not getting here sooner, Mrs. Greene. Got word he was headed this way and came as fast as I could. Hope managed a tremulous smile. You came just in time, Sheriff. Thank you. Best you both stay alert, the sheriff warned. Man like that doesn't give up easily. After the sheriff departed, Hope sat by the fire, Grace sleeping peacefully in her cradle, seemingly unaffected by the day's drama. Owen moved about the cabin restlessly, checking locks, cleaning his rifle, peering out windows. He'll be back, Hope said quietly. You know he will. Owen paused in his pacing. Let him come. Next time I won't be so restrained. I don't want you to kill for me, Hope protested. I couldn't bear having that on my conscience. And I couldn't bear losing you, Owen replied, the words escaping him with such raw honesty that they both froze, staring at each other across the room. Owen, Hope whispered, her heart hammering. He crossed to her in 3 strides, kneeling before her chair and taking her hands in his. I've been trying to keep my distance, to be honorable. You're married, you're vulnerable, you need protection, not complications. He drew a shaky breath. But seeing him today, hearing how he spoke to you, knowing what he's done, Hope, I can't pretend anymore. Pretend what? She asked, though she thought Hope she knew the answer. That I'm not in love with you, Owen said simply. That I haven't been falling in love with you since the night you appeared on my porch, that I don't love that little girl as if she were my own. Joy flooded through Hope, so intense it brought tears to her eyes. I love you too, she admitted, her voice breaking on the words. I've been afraid to say it, afraid it was too soon, that you couldn't possibly feel the same. Owen reached up to brush a tear from her cheek. I want to build a life with you, Hope, with you and Grace. When you're free of him, I want to marry you if you'll have me. Yes, Hope whispered without hesitation. Yes. The divorce hearing was set for December 15th, and as the day approached, Hope's anxiety grew. Vernon had made no further appearances at the ranch, but Sheriff Parker reported that he was becoming increasingly agitated in town, drinking heavily and making threats against both Hope and Owen. He's losing support, the sheriff informed them during one of his regular visits. His behavior's alienating even his oldest friends, and Doc Miller's testimony about your injuries has turned public opinion. Still, Hope couldn't shake her fear. Vernon had never been one to accept defeat gracefully, and the thought of facing him in court made her physically ill. The night before the hearing, a blizzard descended on the region, blanketing the ranch in snow and howling wind. Owen insisted on taking the first watch, despite Hope's protests that Vernon couldn't possibly travel in such conditions. I'll feel better knowing you're both safe, he told her, checking his rifle before settling into a chair near the window. Hope reluctantly retired to the bedroom with Grace, but sleep eluded her. Every creak of the cabin in the wind made her start, and her mind kept conjuring images of Vernon appearing like a vengeful ghost from the storm. She must have dozed eventually, because she woke with a start to the sound of breaking glass. For a disorienting moment, Hope thought it was part of a dream, but then she heard Owen's shout and the unmistakable sound of a struggle. Fear galvanized her into action. She snatched Grace from her cradle and hurried to the wardrobe, placing the still sleeping baby inside among the blankets stored there. Then she grabbed the small derringer Owen had given her for protection and crept toward the door. The scene in the main room made her blood run cold. Vernon had indeed braved the blizzard, and now he stood over Owen, who lay prone on the floor, blood seeping from a gash on his temple. Vernon held Owen's own rifle, the barrel pointed at the fallen man. "I knew I'd find you here," Vernon snarled, not yet noticing Hope. "Stealing what's mine." "Did you really think I'd let you get away with it?" Owen's eyes flickered to Hope, standing frozen in the bedroom doorway, and Vernon followed his gaze. A cruel smile twisted his lips. "There she is," he said, his voice slurred with what Hope recognized as whiskey-fueled rage. "My faithless wife and her lover." "Vernon," Hope said, fighting to keep her voice steady, "put the gun down." Vernon laughed, a harsh sound devoid of humor. "You're giving me orders now. Have you forgotten who you belong to?" "I don't belong to anyone," Hope replied, her grip tightening on the derringer hidden in the folds of her nightgown. "I'm not property, Vernon. I never was." "Uppity bitch," Vernon spat. "You think you can humiliate me, drag my name through the mud, live in sin with this nothing." He jabbed the rifle toward Owen, who was struggling to rise despite the blood streaming down his face. "The only one who's humiliated you is yourself," Hope said, taking a careful step forward. "Your cruelty, your drinking, your violence, those are what destroyed our marriage, not me." Vernon's face contorted with rage. "You'll come home with me tonight," he growled. "And tomorrow you'll withdraw those lies about abuse, or I'll kill your lover and that bastard child." Something inside Hope snapped at the threat to Grace. In one fluid motion, she raised the derringer and fired. The shot was deafening in the confined space. Vernon staggered back, his expression one of absolute shock as he looked down at the spreading red stain on his chest. "You shot me," he gasped, disbelief in his voice. "You threatened my child," Hope replied, her hand steady despite the horror of what she'd done. Vernon took another stumbling step backward, then collapsed, the rifle falling from his grasp. Owen seized it immediately, moving to stand protectively in front of Hope despite his own injury. But Vernon made no further moves. His breathing was labored, blood bubbling at his lips. "Always knew you had. Spirit," he rasped, his eyes fixed on Hope. "Should have broken you when I had the chance." They were his last words. Vernon Blackwell died on the floor of Owen Zachariah's cabin, his blood staining the rough-hewn boards while the blizzard raged outside. The silence that followed was absolute, broken only by Grace's cry from the bedroom, awakened by the gunshot. Hope stood motionless, the smoking derringer still in her hand, unable to fully comprehend what had just happened. "Hope," Owen said gently, taking the gun from her unresisting fingers. "Hope, look at me." She raised her eyes to his, expecting to see horror or disgust, but finding only concern and love. "You did what you had to do," he told her, pulling her into his arms. "He would have killed us all." "I killed a man," Hope whispered against his chest. "I took a life." "To protect your child," Owen reminded her. "To protect our future. There's no sin in that." The subsequent investigation was mercifully brief. Sheriff Parker, arriving the following day when the storm had cleared enough for travel, took one look at the scene and declared it a clear case of self-defense. Vernon had broken in during a blizzard, armed and clearly intending harm. No jury in the territory would convict Hope for protecting herself and her child. "Man lived by violence," the sheriff said, supervising as his deputies removed Vernon's body. "Fitting he died by it." The town buried Vernon Blackwell in a simple ceremony attended mainly by the curious. Hope did not go. Instead, she stayed at the ranch with Grace and Owen, beginning the process of healing from the trauma and building the future they had nearly lost. Spring came to Montana in a riot of wildflowers and new growth. The ranch, which had seemed so stark when Hope first arrived, now buzzed with life. Owen had expanded the garden at Hope's request, adding vegetables and herbs alongside the existing flowers. They'd acquired chickens and a milk cow, making the ranch more self-sufficient than it had been. On a warm day in May, with Grace crawling happily on a blanket beneath the shade of an oak tree, Owen took Hope's hand and led her to the small rise behind the house. where the view stretched for miles across the rolling plains. "I've been thinking," he said, his expression uncharacteristically nervous. "A dangerous pastime," Hope teased, enjoying the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled. "Indeed." Owen took both her hands in his. "Hope Greene, these past 7 months have been the most meaningful of my life. You and Grace have brought joy back to a place I thought would never know it again." Hope's heart quickened. "Owen, let me finish," he said gently. "I know we've talked about marriage, about making official what we already feel, but I wanted to do this properly." To Hope's surprise, Owen dropped to one knee, still holding her hands. From his pocket, he produced a simple gold ring. "I love you, Hope. I love the strength that brought you to my door that night, the courage you've shown every day since, the kindness in your heart despite everything you've endured. I love Grace as if she were my own daughter, and I want nothing more than to be the father she deserves." Tears blurred Hope's vision. "Owen Zachariah, are you asking me to marry you?" "I am," he confirmed, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. "Will you?" "Yes," Hope whispered, then louder, "Yes." Owen slipped the ring onto her finger, then rose to his feet, pulling her into his arms and kissing her with a passion that left her breathless. When they finally parted, Hope rested her forehead against his, overcome with gratitude for the journey that had brought her to this moment. "I never thought I'd find happiness again," she admitted. "That night Vernon threw me out, I thought my life was over. Instead, it was just beginning," Owen murmured, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Our life together." They married 2 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the local church, with Sheriff Parker giving the bride away and Doc Miller serving as best man. Grace, now 8 months old and attempting her first wobbly steps, charmed everyone with her toothless smile and bright eyes. "She has your smile," Owen whispered to Hope during the celebration afterward. Hope watched as Owen swung Grace gently in his arms, the little girl's laughter ringing out. "And your heart," she replied softly. That night, after they'd returned to the ranch, their home, and Grace was sleeping soundly in her crib, Owen led Hope to the bedroom they would now officially share as husband and wife. "I have something for you," he said, retrieving a document from his desk drawer. "A wedding gift of sorts." Hope unfolded the paper, her eyes widening as she realized what it was. "Adoption papers," Owen nodded. "If you agree, I'd like to legally adopt Grace as my daughter, give her my name, make her my heir in every sense of the word." Tears filled Hope's eyes for what felt like the 100th time that day. "Nothing would make me happier," she whispered, throwing her arms around his neck. "She already thinks of you as her father." "And I've thought of her as my daughter since the night she was born," Owen admitted, holding Hope close. "From the moment I first held her, something inside me knew she was meant to be mine, just as you were meant to be my wife." Hope leaned back to look into his eyes. "How did I find you?" She wondered aloud. "Out of all the places I could have stumbled that night, how did I find the one man who would love us both so completely?" "Perhaps it wasn't chance," Owen suggested, brushing his lips against hers. "Perhaps it was always meant to be." 5 years later, Hope stood on the porch of the ranch house, now expanded to accommodate their growing family, watching as Owen taught Grace to ride her very own pony. At 7 years old, Grace was the image of Hope with her dark hair and determined spirit, but she had inherited Owen's love of the land and animals. "Not too fast," Hope called, instinctively placing a protective hand on her swollen belly. Their son, James, now 3, played at her feet with wooden blocks, while inside, their 1-year-old daughter Mary napped under the watchful eye of Mrs. Peterson, the widow from town who helped with the children. The ranch had prospered under their joint care. Owen's practical knowledge, combined with Hope's determination, had resulted in expanded herds and fertile fields. They'd built a reputation for fairness in their business dealings and generosity to those in need, particularly women seeking escape from situations like the one Hope had fled. "Mama, look," Grace called, sitting proud and straight in the saddle as Owen led the pony in a gentle circle. "I'm riding by myself." "I see you, sweetheart," Hope called back, her heart full of pride and love. "You're doing wonderfully." Later that evening, with the children asleep and the ranch quiet under a canopy of stars, Hope and Owen sat together on the porch swing, his arm around her shoulders, her head resting against him. "Happy?" Owen asked, his hand gently caressing the swell of their fourth child. "Completely," Hope replied, nestling closer to him. "Sometimes I can hardly believe this is my life now. That night when Vernon threw me out, I thought my world had ended. I never imagined I was actually being set free." Owen pressed a kiss to her temple. "You freed yourself, Hope. Your courage brought you here, kept you going when most would have given up." "My courage and your kindness," Hope corrected, taking his hand and lacing their fingers together. "You could have turned me away that night, many would have." "Never," Owen said with such conviction that even after all these years, it warmed Hope's heart. "From the moment I saw you on that porch, something told me you and that unborn child were meant to be part of my life. I just didn't know then how completely you would change it." Hope smiled, watching as a shooting star streaked across the vast Montana sky. "We changed each other," she said softly, "and we'll keep changing, growing together for the rest of our days." "The rest of our days," Owen repeated, the words a promise and a blessing. "I like the sound of that." As the night deepened around them, Owen and Hope remained on the porch, wrapped in each other's arms. At peace with the past and full of hope for the future, they continued to build together a future founded on love, resilience, and the family they had created from the broken pieces of their individual pasts.